Hi, everyone. Matt Silva here from US Lacrosse Magazine, and this is the 5 and 5 with Mark Glicini of the Chaos Lacrosse Club. Mark, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Matt. Excited about it.
Now, for those unfamiliar with this series, it's a new series where we talk to some of the top pros and get them to talk about their peers and provide some of that unfiltered perspective of what they see between the lines and in the locker room. And Mark, naturally, as the reigning PLL Teammate of the Year, it made sense for us to ask you to identify 5 of your all-time teammates and a really interesting list that you've compiled here. But first, I want to get into some of those criteria that you've identified as you were making this list. What makes a great teammate?
Yeah, I think it comes down to only a few things. What comes to mind is the ability to flip the switch, being able to win at all costs on the field. However, when you step off of it, you're kind, you're respectful, and you kind of have that alter ego when you step between the lines and the person that you are off the field, which is more centered around being kind to other people, making sure that you're doing things for causes greater than the game. And I think you see it out of the 5 people that I listed for sure. But it's something that you learn over the years, right? It's not something that you're born with. It's not something that you know when you head into the professional ranks. It's actually a huge learning curve on what it takes to win at all costs, right? And really be able to flip the switch, understanding what that means, understanding the stresses and the pressures that come along with not just being a pro athlete, but being part of a team, understanding your role, embracing that role, and then making sure that you know how to turn it off, which is not always easy when you first step into the league.
Well, and I know you've said you in some ways are an embodiment of these great teammates that you've had in the past, just kind of picking up things from each one of them to determine what kind of presence you want to have in the locker room.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great point. I often talk about it, whether it's with friends, family, or the clients that I work with, the idea that in order to be a great leader, you have to be an exceptional follower. And I would definitely say I'm a combination of the 5 individuals that I listed and many other coaches, teammates, and peers that I've come across through over the years of my lacrosse experience.
And another interesting thing that I found in our previous conversations is you talk a lot about touches. And, we talk about touches as being reps with the ball. But in this parlance, we're talking about reps with your teammates and just taking every opportunity you can to connect with them on an individual level and getting as many of those in as possible. What's your tactic there as you try to build those relationships?
Yeah, it's definitely something that I've come to be known about on the different teams that I've been on is you'll find me saying out loud to touch somebody. And really what that means, and it's all started with me reading an article about Kevin Garnett, that he was the most touched player in the league by hundreds at the same year that he won a championship with the Celtics, and he was the MVP of that championship series. So it all started from that story. And then now as I gotten deeper and deeper into the mental game and understanding that it's so important to be external during the game, that's trusting time, not thinking time. And then you do reflection, debriefing, and get internal outside the lines, and understanding that being external comes from understanding that you're not in this silo. You're not in between your ears at this time. You should be out there on the field focusing on the next task at hand, which is communicating to your teammates, focusing on the next pass or ground ball. And then I take it to another level. And what I say is make sure you go touch somebody, right? Because if you're touching somebody appropriately with a high five or a pound, you're really not focusing on your role or what happened on the last play or the what if in the future. You're external and you're able to focus on the very next task, which is so important in sport.
No, really good point. An ironic one in COVID-19 times, but I understand exactly what you're saying as we're sitting here talking on Zoom, but you can do so virtually in many different ways. So really good. So those are some of the criteria. Now, as we get into your list, again, it's 5 really interesting names of teammates, and I'm sure you could have had scores of guys that you could put on this list. We actually identified 5. Let's start with Matt Abbott, the human clear, but also just a winner all around with numerous college and pro championships to his credit. Why does he make this list?
I just speaking to him and exchanging messages with him last week. He just had his first kid, which I'm so happy about. He's going to be an exceptional father, the same way he was a teammate and a leader for me. when I first came into the pro ranks, I heard about him. I'd watched him play during his time at Cuse, and he's the best two-way midfielder in the league, right, at that point. And I spent a lot of time around him, investing, just getting to know him, wanting to do the things that he does, because it's very hard to stay, not just to become, but to stay. And here's a guy who's performed at a very, very high level for a decade, and he has what I was talking about earlier, that empathy off the field, and then on the field, he does his role and rolls better than most players on the field. So I kind of got to understand what it takes to not only be a pro, but also how to be a great two-way midfielder, how to communicate with my teammates, how to keep my body in order in between practices and games. And him and Mike Evans, we took on a role to go visit a girl named Ella who was battling Ewing sarcoma at the time, which gave us another opportunity to be with each other, do things for causes greater than self, which was able to see Mike Evans and Matt Abbott at a whole different level, not just on the field or in the hotel room. And it was just awesome, right? Because now by following guys like Matt, it set me up to lead others in the same way Matt would.
That's incredible. Sounds like you made some really strong connections there. Also, one of the most underrated players that's ever played. So really good one, really good guy to have on the list there. Someone who's not underrated and who's on your list is Brody Merrill, the living legend, someone who you got to be a teammate with in year one of the PLL and with the chaos. What'd you learn from him as you got to experience in the locker room and on the field?
Yeah, the first story that comes to mind is the first halftime I ever had with him, right? I got to know him through training camp, but we were down at half at Gillette Stadium, game one. And he just talked about how everything was connected. And to me, that resonated more about life than it did lacrosse, but he was talking about lacrosse as a metaphor where somebody somewhere on the field is going to go make a play, whether it's at the face-off X, whether it's on defense or goalie on the attack. And that kind of connection is going to spark somebody else to go make a play, which at the time we needed, right? Because we're down at half. And that story resonates with me. But if you look deeper and deeper into more conversations and more hangouts with Brody and learning from him, he's all about that, is winning those little victories in his life, right? He's a father. He's a devoted captain, but he's also an amazing lacrosse player, which everybody knows. And that comes from him winning those little battles, whether it is mentally, emotionally, I'm sure spiritually, but then physically, he's making sure that he gets what he needs in before every game and every practice, which might be different than another individual. And it just made me, what resonates with me is to pay attention to the little details and understand that those little victories all throughout the days and the weeks lead to championships and championship caliber teams and teammates like Brody is.
Really great insights into a legend there. Now let's move next on the list is Matanowski. And interesting tidbit here, as we're both wearing our USA polos, that it was Matanowski, in fact, who sort of lobbied for you to his father to get you added to the Team USA mix last fall to say, and this is in Coach John Danowski's words, he's a great teammate, and those are very simple terms, but I'm sure they mean a lot to you. Why is the feeling reciprocal?
Just like Matt Abbott, he's a guy that not only became but stayed. And if you get to know Matt, he got a personality that's larger than life, a competitive fire about him on the field that makes you just want to go. Have a motor alongside him. He gets the most out of the athletes that are alongside of him as a player, and then as a coach, I'm sure he does the same at Duke. And being a friend of him, even before a teammate, and even though I was younger, he never treated me that way. He always looked at me as if he was somebody that he could learn from as well. And I just love the idea that a guy who was winning a Tewaaraton right around the same time I was picking up a stick, and then now years later down the road, he's a good friend and teammate that I can really rely on in any situation, not just in a pressure situation on the field, but in life as well. He's one of the first guys that comes to mind because we'll have a connection for life.
I'm also seeing here, speaking of connections, Jake Fercaro, a current teammate with Chaos, and maybe meets that sense of humor best of anyone on this list. Although you got a bunch of different cards here with guys who have a ton of personality as well. But Jake Fercaro, what does he bring to the table?
Yeah, historical guy off the field, but really an avid competitor on the field, right? And I think he's another guy that it comes to and ripples outside of lacrosse. He's a friend first, and that's really, really important to helping us win the games together. And I know Jake on a deep level, and he knows me as well. And I think that connection is what you can see on the field. During the championship series, we spent 21 days in the same hotel room as roommates together, figuring out ways and talking about ways in which we can lead all over the field for the Chaos Lacrosse Club, but also be our best versions on the field for whatever the team needs. And I think what is underrated about Jake Fercaro, and everybody knows that he was a nominee in our inaugural season for Midfielder of the Year, is he cares less about the accolades and the statistics and more about wanting to win, right? He'll take wings on the face-off. He'll get back and play defense like you saw him play during the championship series. And then he has the motor like he did in the quarterfinals against Chrome to put up 6 points, and he can do it all type of thing. And he doesn't really care too much about the statistics as much as he cares about winning. And like I said, he's a great guy to be around off the field as well.
Last but not least, Chef Blaise. What an incredible performance by Blaise Reardon in this PLL Championship Series, helping to lead and engineer that turnaround from winless in group play all the way to the final. What did you learn about your co-captain in these 2 weeks in Utah, and how did your relationship evolve out there?
Yeah, I think after the first year, what I knew about him was that he flips the switch better than most people I've ever seen in terms of getting his preparation and focus in order right before a game. And then if we're to talk about what I learned about him this year as a co-captain alongside with him, and you could see it on social media that the Premier Lacrosse League put out, is willingness and eagerness to let guys know that this sport is so much more than winning and losing. It's about the relationships that come with it. It's about putting an attempt out there, putting your whole heart on the table, which is what he does. And we don't go close as far as we do in the championship series without him. I think the whole world of lacrosse knows that. However, if we were to step away from the outcomes and the wins and losses, what I really learned about Blaise, and I think I already had an inkling about it, but it was really apparent during this championship series, is his leadership of other guys, and understanding how lacrosse is just a metaphor for things larger than the sport, and how you should live your life, and how you should carry yourself, and how you should care about each other. And I can't speak more highly of Blaise than that.
Wow, it's great stuff, Mark. Thank you so much again. This has been the 5 and 5 with Mark Glicini. If you want more, check it out on uslaxmagazine.com. And Mark, thanks again for joining us today.
Matt, it was a pleasure. Thanks for doing this.